Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, we're actually going to be taking a deep dive and checking out a video from Red Plays. There's actually a comment I got. I've seen a few people actually mention this creator. I think he's a relatively new creator. I actually saw he's just published a collab with MTG Jedi, for instance, just today as well. I think it's his first collab according to the title. But I got a comment on my video yesterday on No Dime December from Kelly with a Y, saying, I've recently discovered Red Plays. Doesn't have many subscribers, so it's lacking reach. He put out back-to-back videos the other day regarding No Dime December. Give them a watch. Lengthy, yet intelligent, while being non-aggressive or insulting. So I did give it a little bit of a watch, and I was really impressed with what I saw so far. So yeah, I want to dive in and give it a listen and give it a watch. Now, like this No Dime December video, like it's not a super popular video or super popular topic. I know it's very niche, but I find it interesting. And look, we're going to have loads of normal videos during the week. I'm sure we're probably going to get like new content, new fusion. It's a CVC. I'm going to be streaming personal reward CVC. So we're going to be booking up champions and doing videos and new champions. There's going to be tons of content during the week. This is just a bit of fun for me for the weekend, just to do the type of videos I enjoy making. So let's dive in. Red Plays. This is my message for Plarium. Hashtag No Dime December. So like I was, how would I describe it? I don't know. I'm sort of like, I've got mixed feelings about the whole thing, right? I'm not particularly into boycotts just in general. I believe Red is a big proponent of it, so it's sort of like a different perspective. So I'm excited to see what's going on. We will be watching at 1.5 times speed because this video is like an hour long, and my dad is coming over to visit me in like an hour and a half. So
hello and welcome to Red Plays.
Hopefully we get it all in.
Thank you for joining me for my second video of the day. Now we are still talking about No Dime December. That's a name that's been given to the movement that was started by Jay Giggs, one of our content creators here in Raid. Now, he is calling for a spending strike from all players in the month of December. The purpose of this strike is to get Plarium's attention and to get them to start a conversation with the player base about the direction of the game. Player dissatisfaction is at an all-time high, and we would like to see certain changes implemented in order to improve the player experience. Now,
yeah, that's interesting. Is I'd say probably, yeah, player dissatisfaction. I don't know. I'd have to go back to fully confirm if it's at an all-time high, but like, man, there's a really good chance it is. It's super high. It's always at its worst, you know, after content drought. So like, yeah, I mean, November was brutal, right? I'd say player sentiment's going to go back up like with Christmas and just naturally, and with the new content, the City Centranos. If it's good, I think that will bring things back up. But yeah, man, it's been pretty darn negative.
In my first video of the day, I reacted to Hell Hades' video entitled, What Do We Want from Plarium? Now, I highly recommend you go watch Hell Hades' video. You can watch my reaction to it as well, because I think the discussion is fairly complex and it requires a lot of input from a lot of places and a lot of details that need to be considered. Now, in this video, what
I did consider reacting to that one, but that was like an hour and a half long, so we won't do that.
I'm going to do today is try to answer that question that HH asked, what do we want from Plarium? I think that's really important. I think we want to be clear about our requests, or I don't really want to call them demands, but what would satisfy the player base? What would make us happy moving forward? And what would encourage us to spend again on this game? So if you're
This is interesting. I'm very curious where he's going to go with it. I mean, what would satisfy the player base? I feel like the player base is extremely diverse, right? I do think you could definitely find, I mean, clearly the whole point, what I said in my previous video, right? With the player dissatisfaction, there is a ton of dissatisfaction right now. So there are clearly a lot of like broad points that are going to be applicable to loads of people, right? There's going to be stuff in there. So for example, like in Jay Giggs's video, he was saying, the events, right? Events are boring and too much of a grind, and they're not good, right? I think that's going to apply probably to a lot of people. Not everyone, but most people. So there's definitely a lot of stuff in here that we can apply to most people. But making the entire player base happy, I don't think that's possible. But definitely we can find some broad points that will probably fit for most people, at least some way. And definitely be a steps in the right direction to making things better.
If you're interested in my answer, if you want to see if it lines up with yours, stick around.
Let's do it. I'll link this in the video description as well, guys.
I get started,
so
I just want to add,
just like hop over and subscribe over at Red Plays if you like the video. Let's do it.
Ask you to do me a few favors to help spread this video out amongst the community, because I do think that the topic is very important. So one, go ahead and hit the like button. Two, if you can, put a comment in the comment section. It doesn't matter really what the comment is. It could just be a thumbs up. But the more engagement that the video gets, the more the algorithm will push that to new viewers.
How about a react video like this? How about that? That'll do, right? Hopefully.
The third thing you could do is go ahead and link this video or my previous video from today to your Discord communities or your forums or your friend groups, so we can get as
yeah, man. Like what was her name? Kelly with a Y. She's your best friend, bro. She's your #1 subscriber.
Eyes on this video as possible. And finally, if you're willing to go above and beyond, mention this video to the other content creators you follow, because I don't have direct access to those content creators, and I'd love to be part of the larger discussion. And I think that the more people that are involved in the discussion, the more likely we are to be effective as a group. Okay, so I wanted to start here on this website. This is smartlook.com. It is a blog, and this article is about mobile game analytics. Now, the reason I wanted to start here is twofold. One is, in Hell Hades video that I just reacted to this morning, there's a lot of financial sort of mumbo jumbo, a lot of acronyms, a lot of different terms that maybe the general population isn't as familiar with as people in the business world. Now, these terms, these ideas matter because they inform the mentality and the perspective of the people who work at Plarium and at Aristocrat, Plarium's parent company. And I think in order for our movement, our No Dime December movement, our spending strike, whatever you want to call it, I think in order for our movement to succeed, our No Dime December movement, whatever you want to call it, we have to do 3 really important things. The first is that we have to convince Plarium to come talk to us. And that is what the spending strike is trying to accomplish. It's not trying to hurt Plarium. It's not trying to mess up the game. It's not trying to hurt anybody's profits. What it's simply trying to do is bring Plarium to the table so that they engage with the community in a meaningful way. The player.
That'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, I think that was the original purpose of the Raid Digest, was like to communicate with players more. It can be a little bit meh, and like same thing with the content creator program. Like they actually communicate with us quite a lot. But like at the same time, some of it, a good bit of it can be just like PR speak, right? So yeah, I'll be interested to see what level of discussion there could be. It's probably just going to be like a fairly PR sort of response of like, we've heard your feedback. We're going to be making some changes to the game. Like, presuming this works, we'll make some of these changes to the game based off your feedback. Here it is. I don't know if there's going to be too much of a discussion, but we'll see.
Your base has basically been ignored or disrespected even by Plarium. We have very little influence on the direction of the game. We have very little influence on the monetization practices, and we want that to change. That is some of the most dissatisfying aspects of the game. There are other concerns that we have, but until Plarium comes and is willing to discuss it with us in a meaningful way, change isn't going to happen. So the spending strike is doing the first thing, hopefully, getting Plarium to come to the table to talk to us. Now, the second thing that we have to do is exactly what HH asked. What do we want from Plarium? We have to have clear, actionable changes that Plarium can enact that would satisfy our dissatisfaction, that would alleviate our concerns, and get us to enjoy the game again enough to consider spending at either our normal levels or maybe reduced levels or whatever levels feel appropriate to us as a community. And then the third thing that we need to do is...
So it's not purely for spenders. I will add that on. Like, that's obviously important as well. And that's what Plarium will care the most about, obviously, is that spenders are satisfied. But I think, I mean, from a lot of the comments I've seen, there's a lot of free-to-play players that are also very dissatisfied. So yeah, you want to see those people be happy as well. And Plarium does care about free-to-play players as well. Like, otherwise they'd make the game impossible. Like, it's important for them to have, a fairly large player base. So free-to-play is important for that, for filling it in. Someone that's free-to-play and is happy with the game has the potential to become a spender, right, to switch over. So yeah, I think Plarium values free-to-play because of that. Yeah, so I think they matter too. It's not just about spenders.
We need to consider Plarium's perspective and Aristocrat's perspective. We need to speak their language and convince them that it is in their best interest to give us what we want. Unless they also benefit from the arrangement, they're not likely to just cave. They would rather fight us than give us what we want if it's going to hurt their bottom line. So in order to address...
That's very true. Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's always a good way to phrase feedback to like a company or to anyone. It's like, make it good for them as well, and look at that. And like, that's sort of what you expect to happen with the game as well, that Plarium is going to put stuff into the game that benefits players if it also benefits them. Like, that's what they want to do. Like, so like I said, with free-to-play players, yeah, they want the game to be enjoyable for free-to-play because it could benefit them in the end, but it benefits everyone. It's a win-win situation. They're not, it's a very good point. They're not going to come in and do, like, I might see a comment sometime being like, oh, they should just give us like a free Void Legendary every month. Like, Plarium's not going to do that because I think that's going to hurt their game and the way that works. And yeah, that's not something that they would actually do. But there are plenty of things that they could do that would, again, benefit players and therefore benefit them as well.
Some of the financial terms that we're going to be discussing, and in order to get our headspace or our minds around the perspective of Plarium, I wanted to bring you to this article, Mobile Game Analytics, 6 Essential Metrics and How to Track Them. Now, this was just posted on October 3rd. You can see there is the author of the article. Now, I believe that this is an article that is really trying to sell a product to mobile game publishers that is going to help them basically track metrics for their game in order to maximize profits. Now, there are definitely more than 6 metrics. In fact, their product probably offers more than 6 ways to track metrics. But I want to talk about this article a little bit because it brings up several really interesting points that we're going to need to include in our discussions with Plarium to get them to see our side of things, but also to convince them that this is going to benefit them as well as us. Okay, so I'm going to read some of the parts of the article to you. I apologize, there isn't really a better way to do this, but I'm going to just start here at the top. It says, mobile game analytics tools are a vital part of any game developer's toolkit. They help you analyze what players are doing, calculate metrics and KPIs like daily active users or retention rates, and find bugs and other user experience issues. So KPI, if you've never come across that acronym before, is Key Performance Indicator. So this is talking about certain metrics that give more data about the performance of a product than some other indicators. So key performance indicators. The article goes on. However, merely knowing what's happening in your game doesn't tell you how to improve players' experience or boost your revenue. Now, it's really interesting that in that sentence, improving players' experience and boosting your revenue are tied together. This is the message that we're trying to communicate to Plarium. Okay, so now down here, there is this...
Yeah, it's interesting. That is definitely something. I see comments to the contrary all the time, is that Plarium doesn't care about the players. They just care about money. Again, there is some conflict there, for sure. Like, you know, they basically, you know, they want you to really want these champions, but in order to get them, you have to buy shards really to get them. Like, that's sort of their goal. So there is some conflict there, but at the same time, they ultimately benefit from you being and this goes for any game company. Like, you know, you look at Mario, like, right, one of the biggest franchises in video gaming. Like, why are Mario games really good? Is it like because it's a charity? No, it's Mario games are exceptionally good always because it makes Nintendo a butt ton of money. That's why. That is ultimately the reason. That's why they are so good. And there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, that's capitalism working, which doesn't often happen. Hey, sometimes it works. So there you go.
Bullet point that is talking about how metrics are used in games. It says it's hard to analyze game mechanics and improve revenue, user retention, or other essential metrics. For example, it's relatively easy to track how many people bought a paid add-on for a character in your game. However, to understand why they did so, or why they didn't buy add-ons for other characters, you need to look at the entire experience from their point of view. Without that, you can easily draw misleading conclusions about players' behaviors. So I think this is really important because I think one of the mistakes that Plarium and Aristocrat maybe have made in the past is relying solely on metrics to tell them about the player experience. They don't really listen to us. They clearly don't take our feedback, so we can't conclude that they do anything else but ignore us. And if they are ignoring us, they don't know why we do the things we do. They simply know what we do, how often we do, maybe how much we do. But the reasoning behind what we do may be different than what they expect. Now, the article goes on to say, well,
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is very difficult to know why people do what they do. And here's the thing, right? I think Colred here is sort of saying, well, if they just asked us, we could tell them and then they would know. That also doesn't really help. Like, you could ask someone, why do you do this? And they would tell you, but they might not actually know why they do it either. That's very common, right? It's through anything, like in your relationships and how you work. It's very common, I think, for you to have a whole bunch of reasons and justifications for why you do stuff, and for that to be totally incorrect, that you might not have any idea why you do stuff, right? You know, like people like, I'm so in love with her. I'm so in love. I just met this girl. I'm so in love. Oh, she's the perfect woman for me. That's why. And it's like, the real reason is that there's a whole bunch of hormones telling you, it's like, you must reproduce. Continue the species. Must reproduce. This is the purpose of evolution. That's why. But, you know, they wouldn't say it. They'd be like, it's love, man. I love her so much. Yeah.
Show you how to track these 6 essential mobile game metrics. There are these 6: daily active users, monthly active users, stickiness rate, retention rate, average revenue per daily active user. We saw that acronym a little bit differently in the report, the Aristocrat report that was in the previous video, and then in-game purchases. And we're not going to talk about all 6, but we're going to talk about a few key metrics here and what they mean for our movement and for how we have to talk to Plarium. Now, here is a subtitle area called The Impact of UX on Mobile Game Performance. UX is user experience. So in this article, we'll give you more than a handful of KPIs and a few tips to boost them. Our goal is to help you create a seamless gaming experience based on the wealth of user experience data you have at your disposal. Now, understanding user experience design factors into mobile game performance is the first step towards reaching this objective. Basically, what this article is saying is understanding what the user experience is allows you to improve that experience and drive revenue. Now, let's talk here first about player engagement. So it says it's no secret that engaged players are more likely to invest time and money into your game. Engaged players are more likely to invest time and money into your game. And here's how UX design shapes player engagement. So this is talking about 3 ways to increase or improve player engagement. The first is intuitive onboarding. A well-designed onboarding process ensures new players quickly understand game mechanics and feel competent from the start. Players who effortlessly grasp the basics are more likely to continue playing. So we all know that Raid doesn't do this very well. The tutorial system is old. It wasn't good when it was created. There's a lot more in the game now, and they really haven't improved the onboarding process. Players are overwhelmed quickly, and they often leave the game because they feel like they don't understand how to progress in the game. In fact, I think the best onboarding system.
That's interesting. I actually don't know anything about that. I have no clue, really, like why players leave or anything like that. Could be part of it. I certainly do agree that like the missions in particular are pretty awful. Be like the missions just tell you to do stuff that's straight up bad, right? I remember talking to Erbad about this in a collab where he was talking about his free-to-play account. He's like, man, they just tell you to do a whole bunch of things in the game that don't make any sense. Really does need updating.
Available to Raid is the content creators. We do the work that they should be doing, which is helping players understand how to play the game. Now, the second point here is visual and audio.
I thought they did a good thing recently. Sorry, I keep interrupting it, but I thought they did a good thing recently that I was part of there, which was the Artifacts 101, and they linked it in the game, and like that actually did pretty well. Like I think about 60% or so of the views on that video actually came from Plarium promoting it in the game. I think it was a good thing. I'd love to see them do more of that in the future, like have a like academy section in game that would link to content creator videos like on this topic, and they can do it through like sort of more officially vetted collabs to make sure that like it's good information, that's well presented and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a huge resource there that could be used to make it better for new players for sure.
Auditory appeal. So engaging graphics, animations, and sound design contribute to a game's overall allure. Now, Raid has that in spades. They are crushing it with visual appeal. But I will say that in the 4 years since Raid has launched, there have arisen some competitors who can match the visual appeal of Raid. So I think their advantage in this category is starting to slip and will continue to do so as the game ages. The third thing here is a responsive user interface or UI.
There's not much you can do about that either. Like I don't know, you could do some little bits, but yeah, that's tricky.
Frustration caused by clunky menus or confusing layouts can drive players away. And this is another area where I think Raid is probably about average, maybe slightly below average. There are definitely aspects of the UI which are not intuitive and are clunky and can be very frustrating. The good news is I think some of those are relatively easily fixable, but that will be on the list somewhere. Okay, now let's talk about...
I would say a big one I've seen a lot of comments on is the Tavern, and I think that's very obvious. The Tavern, it's even had a bunch of improvements, right? It's had pretty regular improvements since I've been playing, but it's still pretty bad. You compare it to other games, and it's just very tedious. There's a lot of clicking. It's like carpal tunnel syndrome and juicing. It's not good. So yeah, that could do with improvement.
Player retention, because I think this is going to be a key aspect of how we approach communicating with Plarium. It says once you've attracted new gamers, you need to retain them. A game's user experience design plays a pivotal role in keeping players coming back for more. So now it says smooth performance, intriguing content, and personalization. I think there are a lot of things here, a lot of points you can read through them that are really good, but player retention matters. And I don't think Raid has ever emphasized or focused on player retention. Their business model has been to bring in new players as quickly as possible so that when they lose players, they still have enough daily active users paying for the game to generate enough revenue or to meet their revenue goals. So we saw in the previous video and the information that HH provided that Pixel United, which is the gaming division of Aristocrat, like the mobile gaming division of Aristocrat, lost 900,000 daily active users from 2022 to 2023. And I think that reflects an over...
Yeah, that's a pretty big drop. It was something like, what, 15% drop or something like that, wasn't it? Like they had a pretty, maybe even 20%, a very big drop in the amount of people that are playing the game, but that they made as much money. So it's like they're trying to squeeze more money out of less people. Yeah.
Overall lack of focus on player retention. So we're going to be talking more about this later in this video. Now, the monetization...
We'll come back. Okay, so he's going to come back to it. I would say that it's not entirely true that they don't focus. I think you say it's not a main focus. They do put work, though, into player retention. Like, I mean, let's say Hydra, which has been a huge part of my channel, right? Hydra Clan Boss, that is not for new players, quite obviously, right? That is for longer term players. So that is a big chunk of content designed specifically for them. Or like, again, Doom Tower, it's really designed for longer term players. Login legendaries, that helps long term players as well, but that's a big thing for new players, you know? But yeah, I think there is a good bit of stuff put in for longer term players. It was quite interesting as well. I think they had Cyrilla's interview with Ash a while ago. I think it was with Ash, where she talked about they're very aware that after people get Romantu in game from the missions, a lot of people stop playing. So that was something that they identified at the time as something that they do care about. They want to keep people playing even after they get Romantu, and they're trying to figure out how to do that. So I do think they care about player retention. I do think it's something that they work on. But the question is it as big of a focus as it should be? And I think that's where you can make a very strong argument like Colred's making here.
Strategy is going to be a big part of our complaints as the player base. It does say here that in-game purchases, a great design seamlessly integrates in-game purchases into the gaming experience, making them easily accessible rather than disruptive. I would say we all think that Raid's system of getting us to purchase stuff is pretty disruptive. They're constantly throwing pop-ups at us, and it never feels seamless. It also doesn't feel like good value. Now, there's no ad integration in Raid, which is great, so we can go ahead and skip that. And we can also kind of skip the subscription models. There are sort of different ways you could subscribe to Raid, but we're going to leave that aside for now. Okay, so now we get to those 6 essential...
They've been pushing the sub thing more and more with the Forge Pass, the whatever, the Renewal Pass, the Champion Pass now. It's sort of a subscription model.
Mobile game metrics. Now, there are 2 categories, and as you can see, it says here, there are 2 fundamental categories of metrics that nearly all companies in the gaming industry need to track: user engagement and monetization. The first 4 metrics on this list measure aspects of user engagement, while the last 2 can help you determine if your monetization strategy is working. Now, I think our complaint is that the monetization strategy is not working. We don't know what their metrics are. We don't know what their metrics say, but this is the argument that we're going to be making. Before we begin, keep in mind that both metric types are inherently connected. The more fun and engaging your game, the more chances you have to increase revenue. That's true whether your game makes money through ad revenue, monthly subscriptions, or microtransactions. So this is really important. The more fun and engaging your game, the more chances you have to increase revenue.
That's what I said about Mario, right? Making good games makes you money, but it's hard to make good games. So you can also make lots of money by doing things badly too, which is the problem perhaps with Plarium.
If we improve the game, that is healthy for the players, and that is healthy for Plarium. Profits will go up if the gaming experience improves. All right, now let's actually look at the metrics here. So the big metrics here are daily active users, which is DAU. That's simply the number of people who log in per day. Monthly active users is the number of unique players who log in per month. Now, these are 2 metrics that you can track independently, but the combination of these 2 help you understand player engagement and player retention. So if we look down here, this phenomenon is described as stickiness rate. So your game's stickiness rate is a ratio between daily active users and monthly active users. So basically the idea behind stickiness is how many monthly active users show up every single day. So for instance, if you have 1,000 monthly active users and you have 50 show up per day, then that's a pretty low stickiness rate. Whereas if you had 500 show up per day, that would be a much higher stickiness rate. Basically, this is about players playing your game on a daily basis, logging in every day. So I do think that stickiness rate is something that Plarium clearly tracks. They're trying to constantly keep us in the game, constantly get us back into the game, because they know that when players are in the game, they are likely to spend in the game. And when they're not in the game, guess what? They're not thinking about the game, so they're not going to spend. Now, we have retention rate here, and this is really simple. This is how many players download your game and start to play, and then how many players basically stick around. So there's a rate, right? People leave the game at a certain rate. Now, there's a statement here that I want you to pay attention to. It says, similar to stickiness, the better your mobile game retention, the more chances you have to increase users' lifetime value, LTV. We're going to talk about that more. Also, retaining existing customers is much cheaper than bringing in new ones.
Great point.
Okay, so we got 2 really important things here. Lifetime value is the amount of money that a player will spend over the lifetime of their account playing a game. So if you play for a year, or if you play for 2 years, or if you play for 3 years, but in all 3 scenarios you spend only $100, then your lifetime value is $100. If you play for 10 minutes and spend $200, then your lifetime value is $200, even though you've only played for 10 minutes. So lifetime value is a metric that companies really care about because that actually translates into revenue. However, the second part here is really important. Retaining existing customers is much cheaper than bringing in new ones. In the previous video, Hell Hades talked about how the drop off in daily active users that Pixel United experienced may be the result of a decrease in marketing budget. Basically, the idea is if you're not spending money on marketing, you're not bringing in new players. But my response to that was players have to be leaving for the number of players to go down. If you didn't bring in any new players, but nobody left, your numbers would be the same from year to year. So clearly what happened was more players left than joined. However, here it says that retaining existing customers is much cheaper than bringing in new ones, and that's what we've got to communicate to Plarium. We are existing customers, and it is easier to keep us here and cheaper to keep us here than it is to go and try to replace us. Now, the next metric here we have to...
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. Like, I guess one of the themes going through this as well, like a real worry is Plarium saying that they're in profit mode as well, where the worry of that is the implication that they've kind of gone, okay, because there's going to be drop off as well. Like, it's not like it's easy to make players never leave your game, right? People get bored of anything, right? You keep doing the same thing, you get bored. The worry with profit mode is that Plarium has gone, gosh, okay, wow. I mean, to keep this game going, to keep people having fun in the game, like that's getting impossible. Like, we don't even know how to do that anymore. Like, we don't even know how to design that. It just seems impossible. Let's just squeeze as much money out of them in the short term, because like we just don't see any reasonable way to keep people engaged for like another 5 years, let's say, or 10 years. It's just not going to be possible with like how the game is designed. It's an interesting question. I'd love to have an insight into the Plarium developers and what they think. Maybe they're like, no, that's totally not true. Like we totally have got great plans for the next 5-10 years, and it's going to keep going. Or maybe they're like, yeah, gosh, holy heck, we've added empowerment and a gear's edge. We've got no idea how to keep this game good for another 10 years. Like, I am curious about that. Yeah, but we know for sure Plarium has a massive marketing budget. I mean, that's very clear, right? That's why the game is kind of a meme, right? Because everyone has seen ads for Raid Shadow Legends. Massive marketing budget. Does their budget for keeping players engaged, retaining players, equal that? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know.
Understand is average revenue per daily active user. I believe in the investor presentation that we saw in the previous video that Aristocrat calls this average bookings per daily active user. So they use the term bookings, and so there's a B there instead of an R. But it's the same metric. It's the exact same metric. Now, basically what this is their total revenue per day divided by the number of active users that day. The higher the number, the more revenue they're generating. Okay, so that's all that we really need to know to start to formulate our approach and answer that question. What do we want from Plarium? So now I'm going to take you to my presentation about that exact topic. Okay, so here we are. And as you can see on this first page, I use a lot of the terminology that we just read in that article, also some terminology from the investor presentation that HH presented us with. But I want to make this clear. I think that having specific demands, like you need to change, the market in the game, I think those things are less important. I think those things create noise and get in the way. Those are executionable details, but they don't address the overall problem, right? It's like putting a Band-Aid on a cut. It's like if it's infected, you need to do something more than just cover it up. So I want to actually kind of create an approach here. I want to get us all on the same page. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to refine our communication down to one real demand. Okay, this is the central point that we're all, I think, dissatisfied with. And so if we're going to make one demand of Plarium, I think it has to be this. Make player satisfaction your guiding principle. Right? That's what we want. We want our satisfaction in the game to be your concern. Rather than treating us as a resource that you can farm and get money from and then discard, treat us as valuable. Respect us as people. Respect our investment in your game and celebrate the game with us. We love the game. We love the game you created. So give us some of that love back. And if you watch any of JGig's video, that is clearly one of the things that he is most upset with. He feels like Plarium hates us. Now, I addressed that in my previous video. I don't think they necessarily hate us. I don't think most people do, but they certainly act in a way that could indicate, at the very least, disregard. And so we want to change that. So I think our one demand of Plarium is make player satisfaction your guiding principle. Now, remember I said we needed to do 3 things, and then one of them is...
I mean, I could tell you, certainly being a content creator, like, the content creator chat is like a constant shit show. But like, I mean, like every time they bring out news, there is always that fear of being like, oh God, okay, there's a new thing, new announcement. What have they done this time? What have they done this time to make this shit, right? Oh, it's a champion pass for Xena. Okay, cool. What have they done to make this shitty? What have they done? My worry about this, like, Cursed City of Centrano, it's like, man, it looks great right now. I'm really, really excited. I hope they haven't done something stupid to make it suck. We'll see.
Just communicate clearly what we wanted. So we're going to get to that. The second thing is we have to bring Plarium to the table, and we're hoping that not spending in December will do that. But the third is we've got to convince them that it's in their best interest to listen to us. And so that's what this page is about. I want to tell Plarium how focusing on player satisfaction will increase revenue, because it will. Remember what that article was just talking about. If you can increase the players or improve the player's experience, that will drive revenue. So these are 6 different ways that I believe that focusing on our one demand and making player satisfaction the guiding principle will result in an increase in revenue for Plarium.
Interesting. That's a little bit of a weaker point, actually. Like, Plarium, I mean, everyone will, I think most people would agree. It's like, Plarium cares about money more than anything else. So they will do whatever they want to make the most money. If Plarium thinks that player satisfaction, I think player satisfaction, that's pretty well known. Like, for anyone that's really looked into it at all, that is obviously a good thing. But it's not the only thing that affects your monetization success. But like, if Plarium only cares about money and making players happy will make them more money, then Plarium would, without any question, care about player satisfaction as the main thing. If Plarium does not care about player satisfaction, perhaps, yes, perhaps they're just simply wrong. They are ignorant. They don't understand. They're making a mistake. That's possible. Or also potentially they have something else. They think that actually focusing on something else is going to make them more money. Where it comes into some of the complexity of game design and costs. And this is what I was talking about there a bit as well, of like, what would it cost to retain players and make them happy in Raid Shadow Legends, a game that's 4 years old, what is the process for keeping that relevant for another 4 or 5 years? Maybe it isn't practical, you know? Maybe it isn't. Maybe profit mode, our worst fears about profit mode, are actually the most sensible thing for Plarium to do. And they go, well, player satisfaction, we would love to. That would be great. But unfortunately, there's too many other factors here. So I think that's a bit of a weakness here. But anyway, let's make all the points, right? Let's go.
Okay, so the first thing is that if you make player satisfaction your guiding principle and you're actually competent at your job, which I think Plarium is, that will improve the current player satisfaction. So the current player base that is in-game right now will be happier. That is going to increase those metrics we were talking about. It's going to increase stickiness, right? That means people will log in more frequently because they're having a better experience. So they're not going to want to avoid the game. They're going to be drawn into the game. It will improve retention. New players that join in the game will also have increased satisfaction and therefore will stay at a higher rate than they currently are staying. They will abandon the game less frequently. It will increase the number of daily active users, because if you are holding onto your current player base and you're bringing new players into the game who are staying in the game, you can't help but drive up the numbers of players in the community. And finally, this will increase the lifetime value of the players' accounts, because the more players that stick around and the longer that they stick around, the more likely they are to continue to spend money. Remember that players spend on games that make them happy. They don't spend on games that they hate. Okay, number 2, we're going to improve player and content creator reviews. Players are going to go out and say, this is a very satisfying game. They're going to tell their friends, you should play this game. Content creators aren't going to be complaining about the game. They're going to be raving about the game. They're going to be trying to find ways to draw in new players, because new players mean new viewers for content creators. So as long as the game is good and I don't have to lie to my viewers and tell them it's good when it's not, then I'm going to get more viewers by being positive about the game. Now, all of this is going to maybe not increase revenue. It could.
I don't know if that's quite true. I think it's a well-known fact that negative videos get the most views. I think, yeah, that's nearly always the case. Also, the POG thumbnails, those work as well, sadly. I don't want to make those thumbnails, but they do. But I think there's always a big motivation for content creators to be negative. Yeah, I think so. And it's a fun sort of thing of like poisoning the well a little bit. Like if you keep talking about the game sucks so much, and eventually people are going to quit the game, right? And then they're not going to watch your content. But it's like sort of short-term versus long-term gain. I don't know. I think like it's pretty ubiquitous across all content creators and all sorts of things that, you know, drama and negativity gets a lot of views. Like I actually saw like Colred's video, like this video has like half the views of the video being like, I disagree with Hell Hades. You know what I mean? Like, what? Is that video twice as good? No. But oh, it's like disagreeing with Hades. There's some juicy drama and negativity. Let's click that. Let's go. So,
because it could pull in more players, but it could just reduce your marketing costs. Content creators and players who are playing the game and give reviews, that's free marketing. We are spreading the word about the game without you spending a dime.
Yeah.
Now, the third way this is going to increase revenue is it will increase new player downloads. So that will increase your number of daily active users. New player downloads, we already know that from 2022 to 2023, Pixel United lost 900,000 daily active users. If you can increase the number of people who are joining the game, that's going to help raise that number back up. It's going to improve community confidence in Plarium. This is huge. This is incredibly important. The players don't trust Plarium. The content creators don't trust Plarium. The media doesn't trust Plarium. Nobody trusts Plarium.
No.
Why? Because they have shown again and again that for everything that they give us, they demand something in return. They never are focused on our satisfaction as players. They are focused on giving us the least amount that they can that will cost them anything, and then extract the most that they can that will profit them. And we want to change that equation. We want to say, if you give us value, we will give you value. If you give us a fun, pleasurable, satisfying gaming experience, we will reward you with in-game purchases. So if we do this and we feel like we improve the game, and now that we trust Plarium, if we trust that they will abide by that agreement, that's going to increase the average revenue per daily active user. People will spend more per day.
I think so. I was listening to his last couple of sentences. I think what's really interesting about this for me is that I feel like Plarium has pretty consistently been Plarium from pretty much day one, right? They've pretty much always been doing that, which is like, just going to try to make a crazy amount of money off of people. Like, stuff in the game is really expensive. It's hard to get. I feel like that has almost always been the case, like in terms of their monetization. And what has that done for them? They've made a crazy amount of money, you know, since the game has come out. They have made so much money. So I think you've got a conflict, you know, where Plarium is like, this is the precedent, right? Having stuff be crazy expensive and crazy hard to get, that has made us wildly successful. So much more than other games, which have maybe been doing this stuff more. That has made us wildly successful over the last few years. So I think there's going to be a tension there to being like, okay, yeah, well, that did work for you really well over the last few years, but maybe now is time to change, right? Maybe a change has to happen. And continuing to put, and I feel like there is a trend, a negative trend in that direction of making things worse in the game, right? If that continues, it's not going to keep making you crazy money like it did before. That this is actually going to trigger burnout, and this is what's going to push people away. I think it's difficult to prove that, right? It's difficult to prove it because Plarium is sitting there on the mountains of cash being like, bro, like, we paid all this money. And don't forget, like, they are a very, very well-established, part of this massive, aristocrat, this massive gaming, company, with tons of different parts to it, like across, slot machines, casinos, all sorts of things, right? They've a ton of knowledge there built up. I don't know, like, will it work? Will they change? Maybe. I do tend to lean towards Colred's side of it here, being like, I think that, yeah, you do need to change now at this point. Just based off of my read of comments and how things have been going over the last while, I think they've gone too far, and I am seeing a lot of burnout, and yeah, their daily active users are going down. I think it is time to make a change. And the worry is profit mode, that Plarium would be like, well, we don't really care. We're going to keep doing what we've always been doing because it has been successful. That's the danger, isn't it? Big danger. Oh.
Because they're going to trust that they're getting value for their dollar. And this is going to happen in a bunch of different ways. But again, as you increase spending, the LTV of each account is also going to go up. Now, one of the ways that improving community confidence will result in increased revenue is something that I don't think Plarium has ever considered. And it is that you will convert free-to-play players to spenders.
Oh, right? They've considered it, but they thought, oh boy. They're like, wait, we can get money out of free-to-play players? Holy shit, they've thought about it. I think they've thought about that a lot. I think that's one of their favorite things to talk about.
I am not a free-to-play player who has no money. I have money that I can spend on games. In fact, I spend on games frequently. I don't spend on this game because I don't trust Plarium. I don't trust that they are going to give me value for my money, and I don't trust that they have my best interests at heart. So I choose not to spend. But if you gave me good value, and if you made me trust you, I would spend in your game just like I spend in other games. So you can convert at least some portion of your free-to-play players to spenders, and that's going to increase your average revenue per daily active user, plus it's going to increase the lifetime value of those formerly free-to-play accounts. Finally, by having a good game that focuses on player satisfaction, you are going to extend Raid's lifespan. Now, that is going to massively improve your lifetime value of accounts because the longer the game goes on, the more those accounts that are engaged in the game can spend. But it's also going to improve your margins. Your profit margins are going to continue to rise because the performance of the game won't drop off as much, and you won't have to continue investing the capital investment that you have already put into the game. You now have all of these in-game assets. New players have so much of the game to play. They can come in and play for 3 or 4 years and never get to the end of the game. That wasn't true initially. You had to continue to develop all those in-game assets. Well, now those assets are paid for. Now those assets exist. What that means is players are playing a game that you don't have to spend money to create anymore.
That would be the more positive take on profit mode, is going, yo, we've got a game. Like, we've got a massive game. There's tons of stuff in this game. Let's make it good, and let's just make the most profit out of it. Like, we don't need to develop an entire game. Like, we've got a massive game. You could play this game for years, right? So that's what profit mode is. That would be a more positive take on it. I think that'd be more positive for us. I mean, the players, right? It means it's not about milking monetary value out, but it's about being like, yo, we've got a great game. Let's just, keep it rolling, keep it going, make it good, and it's going to make us money because we built a great game. It's proven we've built a great game. Let's go. Don't know which is true.
What you have to do is keep it going, and that's a much smaller investment, and therefore profit margins are going to increase. Additionally, if you can say to investors that the lifespan of this game isn't another 2 years, but another 10 years, that increases the value of that intellectual property. Raid now becomes much more valuable to investors in the long term. And that means more potential for spin-off investments, for sequels, for more animated series, for marketing opportunities like action figures or whatever it is that you want to do. The longer the life of an intellectual property, the more it becomes a part of the fabric of our culture. And then the more that asset can be leveraged for future profit.
So what do you think the lifespan of Raid is?
Who's watching this, that focusing on player satisfaction can drive revenue and increase the value of the game for Plarium and for Aristocrat. Now we have to talk about the No Dime December. What are we asking for? What are we asking from Plarium in this way? Like making player satisfaction your guiding principle. How do you go about doing that? And there really are three objectives that you need to employ in order to make player satisfaction your guiding principle.
Let's go.
So objective number one, you need to create a more player-friendly economic model. The current model is whales first. And I think that Plarium needs to begin to move away from the whales first financial model. Now, this is tricky because I think one of the things that Plarium is scared of is that if they change their financial model, they will make players angry. They will make the whales who have already spent a lot of money angry by reducing the value of their accounts. And I would say that you don't necessarily have to do that.
I'm curious where he's going to go with this. I feel like that's tough, right? Like, again, whales are where nearly all of your money comes from. I think that's tough. It's sort of something you have to accept with nearly all these mobile games. You're like, okay, yeah, well, like whales are the #1 priority. That's obviously the way it's going to be. And then you're looking for games that are like cater really well to low spend and free to play players. And I think that Raid, broadly speaking, has done that. Again, I have a lot of concerns. I've spoken about this in detail, especially like fusions and events and a lot of the requirements increasing, which I think is extremely negative for the game because it is going more towards a whale only financial model, not whales first. That's probably, yeah, I'd say that's how I put it. I'm fine with the whales first, so long as a free to play player can have a brilliant game experience. I'm actually totally fine with whales first. I think you kind of have to be to play this game, right? I'd be in a weird spot as a content creator if I wasn't for this game. I'd be concerned about having more of a whales only, a spenders only. Not even whales only. I think a spenders only, because I think, low spend, probably not under that much pressure. Like I spend $50 a month. I talked about this in the video yesterday. On average, I spend $50 a month in this game at the moment. And I feel like I can, as a late game player, that's also part of it, but I can complete everything nearly in the game relatively stress-free. Yeah, I wouldn't want a spenders only, but I'm okay with whales first, I think. But let's see where Colruyt goes. I'm curious.
You don't have to make their accounts less valuable. I don't think that's the natural result of moving away from a whales first financial model. I think you just need to do some other things that are going to improve the overall feel of the game. All right, so how do we move away from the whales first financial model in a way that makes sense? Well, the first thing that I think we need to do is lower some overall price points. Now, as you lower prices, that is going to increase the volume of sales. But of course, the increase has to sort of outstrip the percentage that you reduce. So if you reduce a price, let's say you do a 20% price reduction on everything across the board, you now need to generate 25% in increased sales to maintain the same revenue, right? So a 20% price reduction requires 25% of increased sales. And that's just the way that math works. And it'll be different, with each price point. So for instance, if you reduce the price point by 50%, right? If you make anything that costs $100, $50, you now need to double the sales in order to match the revenue. In order to sell $100 worth of stuff, you need 2 sales instead of 1. So maybe that's a little bit more clear. But I do think that we need a significant cut in price points across the board. The question is, will this generate a higher volume of sales? Yes, of course it will. Will that higher volume be enough? It's hard to know. It's hard to know because it will be different at each price point. However, that's not necessarily the main consideration. What the main consideration should be is, does lowering overall price points increase player satisfaction? Because if it does, then it has a chance of increasing the number of daily active users per day by increasing player retention. And it has a chance to improve the LTV of an account by extending the life of that account. That player will play for longer. So by improving price points, you improve player satisfaction. And then all of those things that were true over here are now happening. Improve stickiness, improve retention, improve daily active users, improved, lifetime value of accounts. And even maybe the average spend might go up if players feel like they're getting more value for it. Now, the second thing we can do to create a more player-friendly economic model is to introduce more higher value offers for low to mid spenders. The whales first financial model is basically saying to everybody who doesn't spend very much, we don't care about your money. Now, I'll give you an example in-game that is currently happening. The Xena pack, the Xena Pass, Champion Pass, is $40, and it's awful. And my guess is if you cut that down to $20, you would have more than doubled your volume of sales.
Ooh.
And you would not have increased the number of whales who bought that pack. Every whale who was interested in Xena didn't blink at $40. They just bought the pack. And probably the exact same number of whales would have bought it at $60 or $80 or $100 or $200. Because if they're whales...
It's interesting. It sort of depends a bit on your definition. That's something I'd be a little bit concerned about. In the Raid player base is, I feel like people like to push the definition of like whale and kraken. They like to keep pushing it up so that it's always far beyond where you are. Like I might see, sometimes you see comments be like, I'm a low spender, man. I only spend $200 a month. And you're like, bro, are you serious right now? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm a low spender, man. It's only 200 quid, right? Or like, I spend 1,000 a month. Like, oh, that's pretty low spend, right? There's whales to spend way more. That's pretty low spender. So I don't know. Like, yeah, it depends what you define it as. I'm interested where he's going to go with objective 2. This objective 1, I'm like, I'm not super sold on this one. Like this one, like for me, this is going back to the we were talking about at the start, you know, of like people want different things. For me, this objective, I actually probably don't care. Like if they don't change this, I genuinely don't really care. Like I feel that, you know, prism shards aren't amazing. I think that primal shards are clearly overpriced relative to what they've stated their value is supposed to be. And like what you get out of them. But like I don't really care if they change that stuff, honestly. Like, I think the Xena pass was priced way too high for a champion pass. Like, I think that should be much cheaper. Yeah, obviously, but I don't really care. Like, you know, if Plarium comes in tomorrow and it's like, yo, we're whatever he said, like, we're gonna cut the prices of everything by 20%. Am I going like, wow, the game is amazing now? I'm like, the game is exactly the same. Like, I don't give a shit. You know, let's fix other stuff, but. Well, I'll let him finish off this point, but I'm not. For me, I'm sure lots of you people probably do care about. Like this is the thing, right? About variety. A lot of people probably do care a lot about this. For me personally, kind of don't give a shit. To be honest,
won't blink at $200. However, the mid spenders, some of them spent the $40. Some of them didn't. The low spenders, probably none of them spent, or very few of them spent the $40. Now, if you cut that down to $20, my guess is you would have more than doubled the sales. If you had cut it down to $10, my guess is you would have multiplied that sales by a factor of 10. I would have converted from a free-to-play player to a...
That's really... I think that'd be so interesting. Yeah. So, like, they obviously... Right, Plarium obviously cares about the most money. So, you know, by putting Xena in for $40, right? If Plarium genuinely believed that selling Xena for $20 would have got double the money or more, surely they would have done it, right? You know, if they're walking away with, like, $1 million versus $1 million plus 200 grand, like... they would have gone for more money, right? They clearly would go for the thing that makes them, or one assumes they go for the thing that makes them the most money. So they clearly must feel that $40 for Xena is going to make them the most money, at least long term. I'd be fascinated to know why, because again, I think like it does seem fairly, you know, straightforward, intuitive, doesn't it? That well, if they charged $20, they probably would have sold more than twice as much. You know, that's something that's very intuitive. I wonder, is that intuition wrong? Are there other factors that we're missing? Because, again, going back to Plarium cares about money the most, because that's what every business cares about the most, really, at the end of the day. Certainly big businesses. Sure, they would have done it. I'd be really interested for a peek behind the curtain on that, let me tell you.
Spender, if the price point for that pass had been $10. Now, there would still be some people who were unhappy with that price point. They would have said that the champion should have been free, and that's something else to consider.
That's a great... Oh, that's a great point.
If you have good value...
I think that's a great point. I love that idea. That's probably my favorite idea for the champion passes. Champion pass, do it. Get Xena for free. In the paid pass, there's like cool skins, cool gear, you know, stuff to upgrade her, maybe souls for Xena. So it's like, okay, yeah, you go in completely free. You get a great, cool, interesting champion out of it. You go in paid. There's some nice cosmetic rewards, some power rewards as well, because, you know, that's sort of honestly expected with the game. That's just how the game works. That would have been more interesting. Yeah. So yeah, agree with that for sure.
Value for low spenders. A lot of low spenders will spend. They will feel comfortable spending, and free-to-play players will spend because they'll feel comfortable spending, and you will generate a lot more engagement along with a good amount of revenue. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here is reduce, or at least I would...
By definition, free-to-play players cannot spend. But I get what I'm just jesting. I get
but at least reduce the nickel and dime tactics. And the nickel and dime tactics are pretty simple. Every single day, there's a new way for us to try to spend money in Raid. And it can be a little bit here, a little bit there. But I do think that one of the nickel and dime tactics that you see very frequently is anytime we get something new in the game, there is a trade-off. There's always something that requires you to potentially spend built into the mechanic just in case. So
yeah,
you're having trouble getting, you know, vault space. You want to get more vault space. You need to spend a lot of silver, and the silver keeps climbing and climbing and climbing to astronomical amounts. And now the only way to get that amount of silver is to grind for like 10 days or to spend gems or to buy silver in the shop. Why make that painful? Why nickel and dime me for a few hundred gems when you could just get to 5 million silver and keep it there? For every row of 10 in the vault, you could just do that. I would pay 5 million silver. Think it was a little bit high, but basically be okay with that. And as long as it didn't climb above 5 million, I'd be like, oh, that's great. Why create a clan insignia system where you can only save it twice before you have to start saving with gems?
Yeah, right.
Because Plarium believes that changing your insignia is something that players are going to want to do. And so they should have to pay for it. But they shouldn't. It improves player satisfaction. And if you don't charge them for it, they will be more satisfied with it. And the amount of money that you're going to get out of your player base for those specific gems, just because they want an additional chance to change their insignia is so minuscule. It's not worth the bad feelings. It's not worth, you know, the hurt and the frustration of the player base for minuscule, like pennies you're getting by adding that inconvenience. So remove.
Yeah, you know what? This is a great point. I feel like I've been mostly sort of disagreeing with the things and sort of just going along with the stuff I agree with. I probably should be focusing more on agreeing with the points that I really agree with. That's a great point. That's a really interesting way of looking at it. I think that makes a lot of sense. That does lead to a lot of frustration, is that, yeah, there's constantly stuff in the game where it's like just, it's probably like the designers, it's just so natural for them to monetize stuff. But then for a user, for a player, it can actually feel really intrusive and invasive. So yeah, like, yeah, man, just let the insignias be changed for free. Like, why bother putting any monetization on it? Just make it better, because as we know, making the game better, that keeps players happy. Like, how much money do you actually get from adding a gem cost to the insignia? It's just giving you bad press. It just makes people annoyed, and that's bad. That's a great point. And yeah, lots of little things in this game. I mean, another very common one I've seen has been like people very frustrated with energy costs for Iron Twins. Yeah, Iron Twins. People find the energy cost there extremely frustrating. Again, that's sort of an example of nickel and diming, of like putting too much cost on stuff. Like, it's okay for not everything to have a cost, right? It's okay for some stuff to just be pure good, and the monetization comes from the game just being better because of it. I think that's actually a really good point. Yeah, because I feel like, and again, I think that's an easy thing to sort of happen almost unnoticed, right? You get so used to adding a cost and attention to everything that it's easy to go overboard without realizing it, for sure.
Those nickel and dime tactics, stop doing it. Just give us good content, and we will spend on the avenues that you already have in the game. You don't have to keep creating new avenues for us to spend.
Doom Tower, when Doom Tower came out, they tried to sell keys to progress through Doom Tower faster. People went ballistic, and they never did it again. Doom Tower has basically no inherent monetization. This is frequently the area of the game that's called out as being the best. Hydra is, I think, similar as well. Like, you can't buy extra Hydra keys, right? But you can buy the champions to succeed. Same with Doom Tower, right? You can't buy Doom Tower keys. There's no monetization there. Like, you don't need to pay to get into secret rooms. You can just do them. But it's the inherent monetization of the game by being like, oh, Doom Tower is cool, or Hydra is cool, I want to succeed. You then can go and spend in the game to succeed in that, just for the inherent monetization in the game. Yeah.
We don't want new avenues to spend. We want the same old avenues, and we want those avenues to be better.
Sure, let's go with that.
Now, objective 2 is to make the player experience the core concept of game design. Now, this is really, really important.
Okay.
Remember that we talked about making player satisfaction the most important thing. Well, that means that players need to be satisfied by the game design, by the things that come into the game. And so the very first thing that a game developer should be doing, the player should be doing, is talking to the player base. So player feedback should help select and design improvements to the game. If you are asking for feedback and completely ignoring your player base, then you are reducing player satisfaction in two ways. One, they feel disrespected because they ask for something and you ignore them, or they ask you to take something away and you ignore them. So that is a form of disrespect. That gamers are smart. They know that they're being ignored. The second thing that is dissatisfying is that the new game design doesn't actually give them what they asked for. So now they're dissatisfied with the game as well. They're unhappy with Plarium and they're unhappy with Raid. And that is going to mean your player retention is going to go down. Players going to leave the game, or they're at the very least going to spend less.
Yeah, it's certainly complicated, right? But yeah, like I mean, like, I don't recall ever getting, a survey in the game, like, how do you feel about this or that? It's true. It's I do feel like they mostly, I mean, certainly according to them, they listen to the feedback and stuff we give in content creator chat, and I certainly think it's silly to think that that is the only thing that matters, or that we are always right. I don't agree with that, for sure. But like, it's hard to know. It's hard to know behind the scenes how much stock they put on that. Like, because for me, I might be like, man, my video giving feedback is the #1 best video ever, and it's the most important thing. They should act on this fully, completely, immediately. Maybe in Plarium's side, like, I don't know, maybe they think my video is great and they watch it loads and they're like, yeah, absolutely, we're going to try, but there's things holding us back. Or maybe they're like, yeah, we love it. Maybe they're like, we totally disagree, it's a crap video. Maybe they don't even watch it. Maybe they don't even care. We just don't really know what they do behind the scenes. But it is definitely true. It doesn't seem like they do much polling or surveying of the player base to see what they think. Probably exit poll. I don't know if that's a thing. Like if you quit the game, does it ask you like why you're leaving? I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, maybe they just rely on metrics and interpreting those metrics, understanding why. That is tough, but yeah, that is tough. So again, I'd love a peek behind the curtain as to exactly how this happens. I'd be very, very curious.
So
Very curious.
listen to your players, get their feedback, and let that guide you. You don't have to listen to every single thing a player says. The players are going to disagree with each other as well. But when you have players who ask for something for a long time repeatedly and never get it, they feel like their developers don't care about them. And in fact, that's pretty good evidence that the developers don't care about them. All right, the second thing here is respect players' time in game by streamlining gameplay.
Oh, it's a complicated, yeah, to an extent. I mean, I definitely see feedback all the time in comments of people asking for really silly things that don't make any sense. Very common, like very common ones. Like lots of people giving this. So, for example, like, oh man, the guaranteed shards. Like I've seen so many comments, but like a guaranteed void legendary should be 30 void shards. And like I understand, you can see where that's coming from. Like 30 void shards is probably the most that they could ever possibly get. You know, pulling in 2x events or something, or just people pull shards randomly and stuff as well. You know, but it's like a guaranteed legendary for 30 void shards. Like that's crazy, right? I think on average, like in a 2x event, I think it's on average like 80 void shards to get a legendary, I think. So giving one away for 30 is just crazy. According to how like the game works. I mean, they could do it, but it really disrupts things. I mean, it's almost to the point you'd rather just give it away for free. It's like a login champ or something, you know? So yeah. The player, it's an interesting one. Like player feedback, it can be good, it can be bad. Like yeah. Let's see what else
in reasonable ways. Now, I did add reasonable ways here because all games have some grindiness, and the value of the exciting moments is increased by their rarity, right? Like you can't make them so rare that they're incredibly frustrating, but if they're too common, then they become less exciting. So we do want to streamline the game, but think of it this way. I think it is reasonable that a successful mobile game could have their players engaged for somewhere between, say, 2 and 5 hours a day. I think that more than 5 hours a day is extremely intrusive, and it's problematic culturally, personally. It's too much time to require. Now, if you have optional stuff that players can do to play more hours, that can be great. People can maybe save up. They can play 1 hour a day, and then the next day play 7 hours. That might be okay. But to require 5 hours a day of game time seems extreme.
Yeah.
I think for casual players would like to spend less than 2 hours. Hardcore players might like to spend 4 or 5 hours, maybe even a little bit more, but that should be something they can opt into. So we need to streamline gameplay, especially as the game gets bigger. As you add more and more content, you need to find ways for players to save more and more time on the other content in order to keep the balance. If you just double the content in the game and that doubles the time requirement, you're making the player experience burdensome.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, so this is something that they do. I think they could do more, though, for sure. Like, you know, they added instant complete clan boss. I'm like, that's great. That's cool. They added permanent super raids in Doom Tower and Faction Wars. I believe that there's permanent super raids coming next year for dungeons as well. I think I heard that too. So like they do stuff. I feel like they could do more. Like I certainly think with, you know, Iron Twins, you know, you can have that be 1 key instead of 6 keys, you know, just do it once per day. But like make the rewards 10 times as good, right? So it's like it's equal to doing 10 keys now per day, but just using 1 for free with no energy. That's a nice little streamline. With Arena, I think Arena could really do it streamlining, like double the rewards and half the tokens. Like spend half the amount of time for the same rewards now. Like that's an easy change. Maybe you could even be more aggressive with that, you know? Like the permanent super raids in general is good, that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff they could do to streamline. Yeah, I think they could definitely do, they need to do more, really, because yeah, I think they've added in improvements, but I think the time you need to spend playing the game has still kept growing anyway, right?
It's awful. I hate it. It's the thing I hate most about Raid, and it's the one thing that I would change above everything else, is if you could cut my time in-game down by like 50%, oh my god, my life would get so much better. So, streamline
gameplay.
That.
You could just play less.
Really simple ways would be, for instance, in Minotaur, take that up to stage 20 and make it a permanent super raid.
Yeah.
Right? Give me more scrolls per run and give me fewer runs per time. If you could do both.
That's a great point. I forgot about Minotaur because like that's not something that's particularly relevant to me. Like I tend to just buy the masteries now because I've got so many champions built. I don't need to master that many. But yeah, for most people, absolutely. Minotaur, improving that, big win. Make the potion keeps drop twice as many potions. Farm them less. Let's do it. Improve everything.
You have streamlined my gameplay in a reasonable way. One way you've done a great job with this player game is with the quick battle on clan boss. Now, not everybody loves that system, right? They don't think it's the best system that you could have created, but most people really appreciate that they don't have to sit there for potentially 20, 30, 40 minutes and watch clan boss runs happen.
Yeah, it's great.
There are a lot of community suggestions about how to streamline gameplay in reasonable ways. Pick 5 of them. pick one every month for the next year. Do something to increase the streamlining of the gameplay so that we don't have to spend so much time in game. It won't reduce the amount of money we spend. It won't. It'll probably increase the amount of money we spend. Okay, the third one is remove or reduce unnecessary pain points, such as excessive gating, RNG, and resource usage. So I already talked a little bit about this when I was talking about
fusions. Why?
nickel and dime stuff, right? But there are also unnecessary pain points in the game that are just sort of poor game design. Maybe the most obvious one is the arbiter missions, right? You have a system where in order to get your arbiter, you need to level up the Great Hall. In order to level up the Great Hall, you need to play the arena. But the Great Hall is gated not just by acquiring medals, but acquiring medals of advancing medal types. So you've got to get, gold medals to get all the way to 10 to get your arbiter. But there's also gating in the arena because you can't get gold medals without being in the gold arena tier. So PvP is already gated. PvP is gated by the difficulty of the players that you're playing against. It's a natural gating system. In addition to that, you have the gating of the Great Hall. In addition to that, you have the grading of the medals of the different colors in the Great Hall. In addition to that, that gates you in terms of your arbiter missions. And arbiter helps you in the arena, which helps you get more medals, which helps you in the Great Hall. It feels like a catch-22. It's really unnecessary. You don't have to do that. You can make all the medals one color. That reduces one gate without opening the floodgates and letting everybody just get arbiter really easily, but it rewards long-time committed players. If a player can grind silver enough and get their arbiter without ever having to worry about getting into gold, that doesn't hurt your game. That improves player satisfaction.
I don't think even letting people get arbiter super easily is that big of a deal. Like, honestly, just let them have it. Like, these days, especially, like, you give away insanely good legendaries as login ones for free, just for logging in, right? I think we're sort of past the point of being like, I mean, when arbiter first came out, probably people didn't have that many legendaries. You got less shards, all of that. Clan boss was more difficult, that sort of thing. So it was a bigger deal. But like, yeah, I'm up for making that way easier. Just redo all those missions, really. They really need a big redo. Make it much more accessible, for sure.
Okay. Additional, systems like the RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG, that's really frustrating, and most players hate it. So find a way to remove some RNG from the game, not all, but some RNG from the game, and give systems that would allow players more control. So if that comes to items or ascensions or blessings, whatever it happens to be, a little bit less RNG and a little bit more control, even if it's grindy control, even if it's control that comes from grinding out the game. Again, that rewards your committed players, and that's going to increase your player satisfaction.
Yeah, I know people express frustration with randomness. I'm not sure. I need some more specific examples to know exactly what to change there. We'll find Hydra maybe too random. There could be some nerfs to Hydra. Like, to be fair, for most people, Hydra is probably too difficult. Like, I love it, but like, I'm bloody hardcore nerd, right? I think probably for most people, Hydra is too difficult. You could make the boss easier, and that would probably just be better, right?
Everyone here is match or exceed the current industry standards for the genre. This is something that you're going to have a problem with, Player Am. This is creeping up on you. There are games that have launched in the last year that are starting to attract your player base away from Raid.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is because they focus more on player satisfaction than you. But we've already talked about how their graphics are catching up to yours. Their game design is catching up to yours. They're using you as the model and then improving the model. And you are still the model, but you're not improving. So what you need to do is match or exceed, innovate, exceed the current industry standards for the genre. And that's going to make you the #1 goal destination game for mobile game players again. Okay, now the third objective here is...
It's tough, right? It's tough, right? Just keep being #1, baby. Just keep doing it. It's tough, to be fair. To be fair to them, it's tough. Just be the #1 athlete, right? Other athletes get better. You just be better. That easy.
And consistent effort on improving gameplay. This is really important for a large portion of the community. So I'm talking about improving current gameplay. Now, I know that new content is coming down the pike, and that's great. We all love new content, especially if it's executed well. But the current gameplay isn't awesome in every case. And a lot of times what happens is Plarium drops gameplay, tweaks it maybe once, maybe twice in like the first 2 or 3 months, and then never touches it again.
Yeah.
And as a result, a lot of gameplay is left sort of in a middling state where it's okay, it's passable, it's barely acceptable, but it's not fun, it's not encouraging, it's not making people excited about playing the game.
100% agree. I think that's a big part of the game in the last year as well. I think that like Iron Twins, Phantom Shogun, Sand Devil, they're all not good. Like, they're all pretty poor pieces of content. They all have massive flaws. They just haven't been banger updates, right? Hydra, when it came out, was received really negatively. I liked it, but most people didn't like it. They improved, to be fair, they did improve Hydra, but then they kind of left it, right? It would be nice to see continued adjustments to it. Whereas I think nowadays, I don't know, when I last did a poll, I feel like it's more like 50-50-ish of people being like, yeah, I'm okay with Hydra, or I like it, versus people being like, actually quite dislike it. I think that's sort of 50-50, which is better than where it was, but it could be better again, right? You could make it better again. And same thing, yeah, with a lot of stuff in this game, right? Tag Arena is terrible. You know, they introduce content and then they never make it better, really. They kind of just put it in there and they're like, it's done. Let's go. We'll fix some bugs maybe, but that's about it.
So there are some ways that you can improve on improving gameplay. The first is to respond quickly to address community complaints about gameplay. This should be a focal point for all developing publishers, like all game developers.
Yeah.
If your community complains about gameplay, fix that gameplay. If there's a patch that if you have to hot fix it, if you have to get a fix into the game for a single champion, for a single fight, for a single issue, do it. Do it as quickly as you can all the time. I swear to God, I've been part of so many game communities. The number one way you can get a gaming community behind you is to respond to their complaints like that. Patch twice a week if you need to. It's this, I swear to God, it's the single way to get players to love you as a development company. Respond to their complaints instantaneously. As long as they're reasonable. As long as they're reasonable complaints.
Plarium absolutely does not do that, right? They'll if a bug helps the players like get more stuff out, they'll fix it so fast. But if there's overwhelming complaints about something sucking, they won't do anything. That's a big failing of Plarium. There's no question. That probably engenders half of the negativity, honestly, is that.
If they're glitches or if they're balance issues, respond quickly. Now, the second here is release regular patches specifically focused on improving game balance. Game balance matters. Game balance is nerfing and buffing champions. It's focusing on fights that have been in the game for a while that maybe need to be tweaked now that another 150 champions have been released since it was designed, and it's changed the difficulty or it's changed the balance of which champions are more or less valuable. Consider bringing the old school champions more in line with the current meta of design, right? Because the new champions that are getting released have different powers and different cooldowns and different stats, and they're just more valuable than the old school champions, who should still be valuable, but are less so in comparison. I think this should be something that happens all the time. A monthly patch specifically focused on improving game balance would be great. At least 4 or 5 times a year, this should happen, if not more. The third thing is include.
Yeah, it is interesting because a lot of people, he said nerfing, a lot of people don't want nerfs. A lot of people, like for me personally, I'm totally fine with them constantly balancing the game and nerfing and buffing. But like I said, I'm a big hardcore nerd that plays this game all the time. A lot of people don't want nerfs. So that's a tricky one. That's more tricky to go in. I think most people are happy enough with buffs. I think there's also a lot of people that don't really care. They'd be like, you know, whatever. You can buff Killian the Lucky again, but like, doesn't make a difference to me. But I think most people would generally be on the scale of like, either I'd love to see more frequent champion buffs, or I'd be okay with that. That's fine. That's something I'd like. So that'd be an easy win for sure.
Include significant quality.
I don't really know why they stopped doing it either, because they used to, and then they stopped. It's silly.
Improvements in every single update. There should never be an update in the game. There should never be a normal update or normal patch that doesn't include at least one quality of life improvement. It should never happen. There are 50 that the community could list for you. Pick 3 per patch. It's still going to take you a year and a half to get them all done. So the fact that there are multiple patches that come out without a single quality of life improvement is incredibly frustrating to the community. But if you focus on this, I talked about how responding quickly to address community complaints about gameplay, that's the number way to get a community behind you. Quality of life improvements, those are our biggest complaints. In a lot of cases, those are our biggest complaints. So just make it part of this. You don't even have to pick the ones that we want. As long as you are looking at the game and saying, oh, that's a quality of life improvement we could do. That's one, and keep doing them and do them every patch and just do multiple ones every time and talk about which ones you're focusing on. We're going to love you for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be as forceful as saying you need to have one in every patch. It looks like it's a big game, and I think it's difficult to get that level of organization, but I certainly do agree that it should be much more frequent than it is now. Yes, they do quality of life improvements, but not anywhere near as much as they should. I say they should easily aim for double to triple the amount of quality of life improvements that they do at the moment as a baseline, and then see how it's going, and maybe do more than that. And like, yeah, for me, they could miss a patch or two, so long as I just want it to be regular, right? To be regular, be the main thing. That it's never going to be far away.
Okay, and then finally, update or replace stale and dissatisfying game elements. There are a ton of gameplay elements, ton of different fights that are stale and dissatisfying. Some of them are just old. Some of them were never designed particularly well in the first place.
Yeah.
Some of them just don't feel great. You can change them. You don't have to remove them. You can just update them. You can work on them little bit by little bit, and the community will give you feedback and let you know if you're going in the right direction. But you can keep making Hydra better. You can keep making Iron Twins better. You can add layers to campaign. You could create what the hard modes of the dungeons, of the gear dungeons, was one way that you updated an old game element. And it's not awesome. It's not overwhelming. It's not like going to make me forever happy about the game, but it's an improvement. And I think everybody appreciated it. It was a nice improvement and everybody appreciated it. Nobody says that was awful. It's not enough on its own. But this shouldn't be a major update. That should be a minor update that's sort of added to the game every couple of months. So continue to update or replace stale and dissatisfying game elements. That's going to be great. That's going to be awesome.
I'd say mostly it would be making stuff easier, honestly. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some bosses that you guys would say like, yeah, it's too hard, too easy. Make it harder, baby. I think generally speaking, like some of the Doom Tower bosses, like Bommel, probably make it a little bit easier. You could probably make Hydra a bit easier. Sand Devil, Iron Twins, Phantom Shogun are big ones that probably should be easier. They're too limited, too niche. Yeah. I think generally making things more accessible is going to probably appeal to more people, I would think, would be my take.
So now that we've talked about our 3 objectives in terms of how to accomplish the goal, right? The one demand that we have of making the player experience the central focus, right? Player satisfaction, the central focus of Plarium's approach. The question for us as a movement for the No Dime December is the timeline. How long do we do this? How fast does Plarium have to respond? How much do they have to do? And how long will we hold out before we say, we're getting back on board with you. We're not done, but we'll start spending again. And I think there are 4 things that Plarium has to do. I've tried to keep it to 4 in every category here. So the first thing is that Plarium needs to enter into immediate verbal discussions with the community leaders. That's probably going to be content creators. They're already in the content creator program. They already have a relationship with the community liaisons. That's great, but enter into immediate discussions. You'll notice I call them discussions. They're not even negotiations. Just talk to us. Let us know that you hear us. Let us know that you think that we're not crazy. And let us know that you respect that relationship of player to revenue, right? That player satisfaction can drive revenue. Let us know that you're on board with that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'll be honest, I don't really expect them to sit down and be like, so Nub, tell us how you really feel. Let's talk about this. You know, let's discuss. We're taking notes. I don't really expect that. But I would certainly, I think it'd be a good idea for them to come out swinging. Even if it was, I actually see it sort of in the next point. Even if it was like, January 2024, be like, okay, guys, and you know, half of it is just pure bullshit, right? But be like, guys, 2024 is going to be like the year of responding to player feedback, of taking players seriously. And here you go. Here are the few things we're implementing right now. There is going to be more, and actually sticking to that. Yeah, I mean, it's not really a discussion. It's just they're announcing stuff and making themselves sound amazing. But like, hey, I can live with that. That's fine. But yeah, I think they could do it even. We'll see what it says for the next point. But I'd love that. Like, kick off January. We already bloody know they've got balance patches planned. They told us like 3 months ago. It's like, yeah, we're going to balance some champions in January. We could do it right now, obviously. We're going to do it in January. But like, they could make that. They could make it a focus. Yeah, like you said, quality of life stuff constant. Beneficial, like buffs to player champions, nerfs to content in the game potentially. They could do a lot of stuff, quality of life, regularly next year and make it a focus, and that would do so much for them. There's no question. Yeah.
The second thing is here, we're going to want some measurable movement in the near future. Now, it's not reasonable to expect a development company to just turn around and start creating the stuff that we want instantaneously, right? There's already content coming. We know that there are projects that are ongoing, but we would like to see some measurable, some noticeable movement on some of our desires in the next 60 days. So that'll be by the time you say yes, not 60 days from today, not 60 days from December 1, but 60 days from the moment you say, yeah, we're on board. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky because the player base doesn't trust Plarium. So it's potentially possible that Plarium could agree to something, and we're just going to hold out until you actually do it. Like, we might not start spending for that 60 days. So if it takes you 45 days to say yes, it might take us 60 days after that to see something, and then a little bit of time before people are like, all right, we trust you again. You could be talking about 6 months of this. That's possible. So I would say get on board as fast as possible, and let's see something measurable in the first 60 days after discussions. Now,
it's almost inconceivable to imagine a world where people might be positive towards Plarium in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, hating on Plarium is just the thing. I think they could change it around in a pretty big way, though. Like I said, I still think, whatever, I'm saying like 30 days, but like just come in January, like new year, new resolution, but like this is the year of player-centric models, whatever. This is the year about the players and making stuff better, and we're committing to it from the start regularly. Let's go. I think they could do a huge thing to improve, and it's something they've never really done. So that would be big.
If we don't see something in 60 days, this could get bad. That would be where it would start to get confrontational. I think up until this point, in those first 60 days, I think everybody's going to be very cooperative. We all want the same thing. We want Raid to do well. We want Plarium to do well. We want the players to do well. As long as we all agree to those 3 things and we're moving in the right direction, and it doesn't take more than 60 days, I think everybody's going to be on board. As soon as we cross that mark, in fact, as we get close to that mark, it's going to start to get ugly from the community side.
Yeah, for me, I'm not into that shit at all. I'm like, bro, like, if you're playing the game for another like 3 months, you're like, I fucking hate it. I hate the developers. I hate everything. Like, just don't play, man. Go play something else, right? Just move on. There's no need to be angry. Just move on. Like, if the game sucks, the game sucks. Like, if you think it sucks, it sucks. Go play something else. There's tons of games, right? I don't really have much time because I've seen it in so many different games. I don't really have much time for the lifetime haters. They're like, I haven't played this game in 20 years, but God, it fucking sucks. It's like, just fucking grow up, man. Move on.
People are going to get unhappy. People are going to grumble. People are going to leave the game in anticipation of the fact that nothing's going to happen. And if on day 60 something doesn't drop, there's going to be a rebellion. People are just going to leave en masse.
And you can come back. Like, if the game changes, like, you could come back a year later, be like, oh, wonder if Raid ever changed. If you look at it, you're like, still sucks. Just don't come back. If something has changed by that point, because players leaving will also have an impact, then you'd be like, oh, give it a go again, Just a game, man. Like, you don't need to take it. Don't get crazy angry. I'm not talking to Cole right here. I'm talking to you. Don't get crazy angry, right? It's just like, if it's bad, then leave. And if it's good and you want to play, then play,
So I think realistically, you can't push that to like 90 days. Can't do it. It has to be in the first 60 days. I would say even like 30 to 45 days is probably the best window.
Yeah.
So if you could beat this deadline, I would do it.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, from
100%.
the long range standpoint, I would say this change towards a player-centric model, towards implementing like player satisfaction as the primary core principle of game design, that has to be permanent. You can't backslide.
Yeah.
You can't give us something to temporarily shut us up and satisfy us and then go back to the way things were. This change needs to be permanent. It doesn't have to be instantaneous. It can develop over time, but a year from now, the game should be in a healthier place, the player base should be in a happier place, and Player Aim should be doing well financially. That is the trifecta. That's what we want. All right, the fourth thing here is ongoing efforts to maintain meaningful two-way communication with community. You can't maintain a player-centric model without an ongoing effort at two-way communication. That means you need to be transparent with us about your decision-making processes. You need to be upfront with us and update us frequently on development directions, on quality of life improvements, on gameplay balances, on patches. All of those things need to be, the Raid Digest is a joke, right? We need way more lead time. We need more involvement in the conversation, right? And that means that not only do you communicate to us more transparently and more frequently, but that when we communicate to you, you listen. If you don't listen, if you simply make, the gesture, if you're like, yeah, we're listening, but then never take our advice or our feedback as part of the decision-making process, then it's not meaningful. Then it's not communication. Then it's a press.
I'm not as pushed on this. Like, one of my least favorite things is I fucking hate, like, when it's like, we're listening to the community. We care so much about you guys. You mean everything to us. I hate that shit, man. I'm like, come on, just tell me about the fucking game. Let's just play the fucking game. Come on, let's go. Just make a good game. Don't pander to me, right? So yeah, that's where my feeling on it. I'm like, I don't really care if you like talk to me, like, and get my feet, like, so long as you're responding to like the general player sentiments and trying to make stuff better for the players and creating a good game, and like, make good announcements, just focus on that. I'm fine with it. Like, man, I don't know. Like, there's some of that stuff. Like, man, you watch BlizzCon, they're like, it's our Blizzard family, BlizzCon, we love you. It's like, shut the fuck up, show me a trailer, come on.
Right, then it's just you doing what you want without us being part of it. And that's what we don't want anymore. Because what we really want is just one thing. Make player satisfaction your guiding principle. If you do that, even if it doesn't look exactly like I've outlined here, but if you do that, then we'll be happy. We'll spend. We'll play. We'll spread the word of Raid. We'll be happy to champion its cause. And we will, laud the name of Plarium and Aristocrat and say, these are great companies. But all of that has to happen. And it has to be permanent. And it has to happen relatively quickly. Now, players may ask, what about specifics? And I think that that's part of the communication process. I think that from this point onwards, we need to have a conversation. And if we're having a conversation, then we can talk about specifics. Right? This should be enough. These should be enough to get us started. Create a more player-friendly economic model. Make the player experience the core concept of your game design. Focus significant and consistent effort on improving the gameplay that already exists and implementing new, exciting gameplay features in the future. And then fourth, do it in a respectable amount of time. Make that change permanent. Make it a philosophical change at the core of your development process.
Yeah. I'll also say that, this is not like, if the developers in Plarium are just like, sit up today and like, oh my God, like, whoa, we never realized there was a problem. It's like, bro, come on. There's been a negative sentiment building for a long time now. So I think very consistently for at least the last year or so, very much so, because new content they've added has been pretty uninspiring. Just lots more monetization. Yeah, I think, you know, there has been, it's been really building for a long time. I think that should be no surprise. So they should already have really been thinking about plans to pivot and to adjust. Like, if they haven't been doing that, what have they been doing? Like, come on. So yeah, I think that they can make fairly significant changes pretty quickly. They should really be set up to do that at this point. Like, this is not coming out of the blue. Not. So yeah.
Always communicate with us so that we feel like we're included in this community, that players and developers aren't at odds, that we're in cooperative endeavor to make this game as great as it can possibly be. All of the specifics of that can be worked out. Every single thing can be worked out. Nobody's going to be happy 100% of the time, but nobody expects to be. No player expects to be happy 100% of the time.
Oh, I don't know. Some do. Some do.
Reward us, give us value, and we will do the same in return. Okay, so that is it for this one. I hope that was interesting to you. I hope it...
Well, there you go, guys. That was my reaction to a really, really, really good video from Colred Plays. I know, let me actually, apparently I haven't done this. Let me do that. I'll link it, obviously, in the description down below. But yeah, I thought that was a brilliant video. Like, I know I sort of probably focused maybe too much on, like, some of the stuff I disagreed with. I hope I also highlighted the stuff I agreed with as well. It's just easier to be, you know, like I said about the negativity thing, it's easier to be negative, right, about these things. So I hope I didn't do that too much. But I thought that this was, again, I'll just say it to make it super clear. I thought this was a brilliant video. Brilliant layout, extremely clear. Yeah, I'm super impressed, right? I'd heard a few people mention Colred, so when I saw the comments saying, you know, check out his video, it's really, really good. I was like, I've actually heard a couple of people mention him. Let me check it out. And I'm really glad I did. I think he's fantastic. He's a content creator to watch, no doubt. And yeah, although I didn't agree with absolutely everything in the video, I agreed with a lot of it. And, you know, I think that core message of, you know, make player satisfaction be the guiding principle, I think that could not be more accurate. Like, that is bang on what we need to feel and what we need to see happen in the game as well. And like I said, this is not out of the blue, right? This is something that has been really building up for a long time. Like I said, I made my video on it initially, and then I had to adjust the video because Jay Giggs made a video at the same time. Like, we both sort of reached similar endpoints in a sense. We both clearly been building towards it sort of independently, and I think a lot of other people as well. So yeah, this is something that's been happening for a long time, and hopefully, I think Colred's done a great job of highlighting in a very constructive way a lot of ways that it could improve. So there you go. Thank you for watching. I've got 15 minutes until my pops arrives. So I will see you all soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.